We all seen it on the news. 5 people going down 2 miles deep in the ocean to view the Titanic. Unfortunately, we know how that ended, but there's a new documentary out on Netflix called Titan, the OceanGate Submersible Disaster. And after watching it, there's some things that I want to talk to you guys about from a licensed therapist perspective. Hey everybody, welcome to my channel. If you are new here, welcome. But if you are a returning subscriber, you already know how my review videos go. Full disclosure, there will be spoilers inside of this video. So if you have not watched this documentary on Netflix, please go on over. It's less than 2 hours long, and then come back and chat with us in the comment section. So I need for you guys to put, what did you guys think about this documentary? And what did you think about the whole thing overall? Because we're about to get into it right now. There's a whole bunch of things that I can talk about before, during, and after in regards to Stockton, OceanGate, and how everything was handled. But the first thing that I want to talk to you guys about is like, what types of people, what kind of people want to go on missions like this? From watching this documentary and from doing my own additional research, there was nothing but millionaires and billionaires on this submersible, or what we would call like a submarine. And if we're being honest, it was the ultra wealthy too. And the types of people who are interested in things like this, like going down deep into the ocean, are what we would call like thrill seekers, people who want extreme experiences, especially in regards to like deep sea exploration. And we all know that the ocean is one of the most unexplored things. It's even more unexplored than space. So there's so many different factors and variations and variables that can go wrong in experiences like this. And we've seen it happen right before our eyes. I also feel like the people who would do something like this, they have like this sensation-seeking personality trait. Probably the idea of wanting to be like one of the first to do something like this. Now, obviously there were tons of people who have already gone down to the Titanic before, but with OceanGate and them making it an experience and this being like a regular thing that they wanted, paying people to come and then they will take them down to see the Titanic. They wanted this as like a business model. This seems to be one of the first for OceanGate. And another type of person who would do something like this, before I move on to the next one, is someone who would have what we would call optimism bias. This is someone who believes that bad outcomes won't happen to me. Yeah, and we've seen Stockton be that way, very much so. And if you don't know, Stockton is the owner and CEO, or was, the owner and CEO of OceanGate, who happened to be one of the 5 people who passed away in this submersible when it imploded. The second thing I want to talk to you guys about is how we all process this collective trauma. I feel like this was something that we experienced called vicarious trauma. Vicarious trauma is when you don't experience a traumatic event firsthand, but you experience it secondhand. Like we all saw it on the news. It was all over social media. We were hearing about the people who were involved in it. This was something that we were watching in real time, essentially, because it was a 96-hour mission for them to try to be found and for them to really figure out what was going on to see if these people survived or not. And in our society, for some reason, we have this intense fascination with disastrous events. And when it comes to vicarious trauma, witnessing something secondhand still impacts your own mental health, even though you weren't directly involved in it. Because what this does, it creates this widespread anxiety. There is something called death anxiety that a lot of people experience. They are fearful of what happens when you pass away. And in certain deaths, when it's a little bit more extreme and out of the ordinary, things like drowning, claustrophobia, isolation, feeling helpless are all things that goes through the public's mind. Because we've seen things like countdown clocks where they were counting down the amount of oxygen or the amount of time left these people had to survive, we were glued to the TV waiting to see what happened, waiting to see if they were going to be found, waiting to see what the next step of the process was. And once we found out and got confirmation that these people unfortunately passed away, this brings me to my next point of the death of these individuals. Now for this one, I promise you, I am not trying to be morbid. When I was going through the documentary and just doing some additional research, all of these questions started coming up in my mind. What was it like for them when they first lost connection with those that were on land? Were they frantic? Were they hopeful? Because when you're in this small capsule, as we see on the documentary, you really don't have that much room. There's 5 people inside of there, but what does that space look like? Especially for those who may have been freaking out and those who may have been a little bit more calm and hopeful that they would get reconnected and be found. As time progressed, what did that look like? Were they fearful? Were they fighting each other? Were they praying? Or did they simply just give in to the inevitable and know that unfortunately they would not survive this incident? I started thinking about what the conversations between them were like as the oxygen started to dwindle down slowly but surely, and what their final moments were. We're talking about a capsule that imploded, which means it essentially internally exploded. I don't know if that meant their bodies were mangled or blown into pieces, or if they were ejected from this submersible or this capsule and predators and fish and shark ate their bodies. Now, again, I'm not trying to be morbid, but these are some of the questions that you have when you don't know the last few moments of someone's life. And can you imagine, as I go on to the next thing I want to talk to you guys about, which is the 4th thing, was about their families. Can you imagine if I had questions like that about this documentary and what happened to them? Can you imagine how and what their loved ones experienced? This was traumatizing for them, a 96-hour search period where they didn't know what was really going to happen. First of all, you experience what we call ambiguous loss because you're not 100% sure if your loved one is still alive or if they're dead. So you're in this kind of limbo mode. Then you might have what we call like anticipatory grief, meaning you might think that unfortunately my loved one is not going to survive out of this. And before we get full confirmation of their death, I'm already starting the grieving process, the loss process. Because you're in this middle ground of like, I want to have hope that my loved one has survived, but I also feel this level of despair because what is going to happen and what is happening with them underwater as we speak. And if I'm being honest, this level of prolonged uncertainty is more detrimental to a person's death more than them getting confirmation of their loved one's immediate passing. And if I'm being honest, as I was watching this documentary, I wanted more from the families. I understand that, this is still an ongoing process for them. Maybe they didn't want to be involved in the documentary. Maybe it is still very hurtful for them. But I think we only saw one family member who spoke up, and I believe her dad was, I think, Mr. Titanic, if I'm not mistaken, who knew all of the things about the Titanic and has gone up and down multiple times over the years in his career. I wanted to hear about the other billionaires. There was a father and son duo that was also down there who passed away. I would have loved to have heard from their families. I had more questions of like, why did they want to do this in the first place? What was the days leading up to them going down in this submarine? What was that like for them? Were they excited? Were they hopeful? Were they a little nervous? Were they scared? Like, what was going on? Like, I would have loved to get some additional information about the experience leading up to that moment. I think this documentary did a great job of giving us the background history, right? Basically 8-9 years before this incident happened, we got all of the background of OceanGate. We got all of the background from first eyewitnesses of people who worked there and who quit too, which we'll talk about next. We got all of this information about how things were built and Stockton and his personality and people saying that he was prideful and arrogant and rich and all of these things. We learned a lot. But I also was missing the piece of like what happened a few days prior to this going down. Because from what I understand, still to this day in 2025, even though this incident happened in 2023, there's still no real closure. The United States Customs still hasn't released their final report. There was no type of criminal case filed. And OceanGate still, to this day, has not released a statement to the family to say, at least, I'm so sorry for your loss or anything. I felt like that was messed up. Essentially, there was no sympathy. There was no empathy for those who were lost. And I get Stockton was the CEO of this. His wife is obviously still alive and she's probably going through her grieving process and his loved ones as well. But they could have at least put out a statement. They could have at least reached out to those who were lost or their extended family to say, hey, I'm so sorry this happened. That's the least you can do. I just can't even imagine what the families are going through, because again, you still don't even have a body. You can't have a proper funeral. You can't have cremation. You can't have anything because you don't have an actual body once this submersible imploded. Next thing that I want to talk to you guys about is survivor's guilt. Survivor's guilt is when you went through a traumatic experience with a group of people and you were the one who survived while other people may have died. And I can imagine that all of the previous staff, all of them, I don't care if you worked there for 2 minutes or for 20 years, they felt some type of survivor's guilt, some type of remorse, some type of sadness. They mention it in the documentary. To be a part of something like this, even if it was just having your hand in it a little bit, it breaks your heart to know that this submersible was not ready to go underneath and go down because of all of the ongoing issues, the failed tests that they had, the sparks and the plugs breaking, the hole cracking, them leaving it out in freezing temperatures, knowing that that wasn't what it's supposed to do. All of these events, all of these red flags led up to the moment of like, this vessel is technically not safe to go down, especially down that far, but they went anyway. And I can see why people quit. There was a whole bunch of people quit along the way when things were funny, things didn't sound right. They were putting people's lives at risk, where Stockton wasn't open to feedback or how he was managing people wasn't okay. People were like, you know what? I can't be a part of this. I'm out of here. But I'm just glad that there were some people who spoke up. Some people wrote a report, wrote an email. One guy even tried to take them to court, even though he couldn't follow through with it because it was costing him too much money to fight OceanGate in Stockton. I'm wondering if everybody involved felt like they could have done more. And that's a part of survivor's guilt. That's a part of the guilt part. Could I have done more? Should I have helped? Should I have said something? Should I have called and reported this? Were there other things that I could have done to have saved these 5 people's lives? Shade to Stockton's wife, because obviously she experienced and is experiencing a loss of her own, but also because she is alive and OceanGate was her husband's, right? There's a level of responsibility still that needs to be had, not only just to these people who passed away and trying to memorialize them, but also to the extended family and also to the general public who was a part of this as well. So even though this was a very sad experience, a very sad and traumatic event, I'm glad I got a chance to watch this documentary because I didn't understand fully how everything went down and what played into the final moments of these people's deaths. I realized there's a lot of people who have a huge, huge love for the Titanic. They want to see the thing, they want to keep watching the movies, they want to learn about the people, and that's fine, right? But there are some things that you just gotta let be. When I think about the Titanic and obviously all of the lives that were lost on that, I see that as like a cemetery, right? And it's a place where a whole bunch of people lost their lives. And is this something that we should be fascinated with? Is this something that we should be taking people down to go see? Like, I just am not sure that if this should continuously be a thing. So I hope we learn as a society that some things need to just be left there, and hopefully no one else will try to come up with a whole nother incident where this could potentially repeat itself. Do me a favor, like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Be blessed.